And before we get started in the show, we have some important information that we wanted to share with you guys. We wanted to promote some things that are coming up in November that we're going to be teaching live and virtually.
Right. Live on camera. We're going to be live on camera.
So we have two things coming up. You want to hit the first?
Yeah. So the first one is going to be Through Balanced Body. And it will be a 2-hour segment on Friday, November 8th from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific time, which would be 11 to
1, yeah,
Eastern time.
Eastern Standard Time.
And the topic is enhancing your personal training with Pilates. So Brian and I are going to take some functional movement patterns that are useful for anybody and basically look at how personal training and Pilates work to develop those skills in your clients. Should be really fun. We tend to do a good job. We tend to have a lot of stuff to say and some good advice for y'all. Some good exercises to actually see us on video live and doing that. So that'll be super fun. You can find that at Pilates.com. I think Brian's going to put a link in the show notes. So he'll put a link down there so you can find that there, or with Pilates.com and you look up there, I think events, and it'll show up there as well.
Also for this, as well as for the second thing that we're going to do November 17th with Level Up Movement, we're going to be Don't Risk Those Discs, all about sciatica. We're going to be talking about sciatic pain and what you can do about it, what it is, how to deal with it, all of that kind of stuff. So we're really going to do a deep dive into sciatic pain. And that's November 17th, 9 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. That's Pacific Standard Time. So my time, Eastern Standard Time, is to be noon to 1:30. So, and again, we're going to be live. We're going to be teaching together. It should be a lot of fun.
So come on and join us.
And keep an eye out on our social media because we will have the links on there. We'll also have the links in the show notes. So you can do a quick, easy click on it. And there it'll be the Level Up Movement one. The doors open on the 27th of October. So you won't be able to register until the 27th. But keep an eye on our social media. We're going to be posting all about it. And now on to the show. Welcome to Moving Conversations, a podcast for movement professionals by movement professionals. If you coach, train, or teach movement, Pilates, or fitness, then this podcast is for you. With more than 60 years of experience in fitness and Pilates, your hosts, Brian Ritchie and Nora St. John, explore the science of human movement, diving deep into the facts, myths, and common misconceptions, hoping to spark thought and conversation about how we view fitness and movement. Now, let's jump into Moving Conversations. And welcome back to Moving Conversations. I'm Brian Ritchie. Joining me as always is Nora St. John. Nora, how are you doing?
I am very well. I've been traveling like a crazy person. I'm about to settle that down. And for those of you who maybe have a busy schedule, which I know many of you do, travel is the one time when staying on any kind of schedule, regularity becomes completely challenging, whether it's movement, whether it's sleep, whether it's food, all those things kind of go out the window. So honestly, I'm looking forward to being more or less home for the rest of the year and being able to just get back on my routine, get, all my sleep schedule together, my food together, my exercise routine together. And I'm looking forward to recommitting to keeping myself together. That's my goal. And Brian, on the other hand.
Oh, no, my life is all up and all over the place right now. I just moved my studio into a new location. So the last 4 days I've had very little sleep and 18-hour days of moving and everything. So my life has been turmoil and it's calming down. I'm on the other side of the move. So most things are in place. I still have more things to put, but within another week, everything should be calm and I should be fine. Like you, I actually looked at the calendar and went, wait a minute. I don't have any travel scheduled through the end of the year. Oh my gosh, this is good. This is all right. So we can catch up. It's funny. In June, we had like a 2.5 month spate that we were recording these twice a week for so long. And we were looking at the calendar thinking, we're like 3 months ahead. This is awesome. We're so far ahead. And then you traveled, I traveled, you traveled, I traveled, and we'd be gone for long periods of time. And now we not only caught up, but we ran a little bit behind that. We had a repeat. We had 2 of them. We
Yep.
revisited the fascia, but it was a good opportunity to go back and take a look at some of our old stuff and say, hey, you know what? Fascia is one of those things that's always in the press at fitness conferences and Pilates conferences. It's always being talked about, that we thought, you know what, this is a great place for us to go to revisit a little bit for those people who have just discovered us. Not everybody wants to go back a whole year scrolling
Yeah. You
through.
got to scroll for a million.
Yeah. So good opportunity for us to do that. But for those of you who watch us on YouTube, I apologize. This was a time before video, so we didn't have the video. We will this week, obviously. Here we are. Hi. You can see us live in person. And we're back. We should be good through the end of the year, and hopefully we'll catch up and stay ahead of schedule. That's our goal, our objective from here on in. And if you like what you hear and you're enjoying what we're doing and want to do, learn more and keep up to date, do us a favor, hit the like and subscribe button. Real easy to do. It'll be in your feed every Tuesday, comes through, download automatically. You can listen to us on any of the platforms you like. We're on YouTube. It's under my channel, Brian Ritchie, where you can see us live and in person, as well as get the audio version. So those of you in other countries, you can always hit the translate and get the closed captioning for that. Moving Conversations on Facebook, Moving Convos on Instagram, where you can check out our Anatom Minis and our Moving Conversations, video versions. And yeah, so that's the way you could all keep up with us. Also email through Gmail, movingconvos@gmail.com. Hit us up. We'd love to hear more. And if you have a topic you'd love to talk about, please hit us up, because we're all ears. And, sometimes we're always wondering, what should we talk about next? So if there's something you'd like to do, please let us know. We'd love to hear from you.
We're also looking at doing definitely some more guests. We've had some really great conversations with some guests, and we're going to continue with a few more of those as we go forward. We're going to keep them a mystery for the moment. Mystery guests. But we'll let you know as those are coming up. And we always have those on our social media that just says who's going to be our guest this week. So keep an eye out for that. And we look forward to keeping in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. And today we're going to continue on what we started 3 weeks ago, which is the shoulder. Actually, 4 weeks ago, we had 2 episodes that we already covered on the shoulder. Last time we did the rotator cuff pathologies, things of that nature that happen within the glenohumeral joint primarily. And we thought today, let's hit the scapula. Let's really talk about scapular stability, because we were joking about this at the beginning, because, the scapula doesn't move. I mean, my skeleton, I look at it, it's screwed in there. There's a bolt right there. I can feel it. Can't you?
Our stability, man.
It's stability.
Right. Move. What does stability mean to you? Like you want your house foundation to be stable, which in my opinion means it will move only as much as it needs to keep an earthquake, I'm in California, from turning your house, letting your house fall down. Right. That's the whole point of stability. With our scapula, that is not what we're looking for.
No.
Okay.
That's a misnomer, because let's face it.
It's a misnomer.
When I first learned, and we're talking about, back in the 90s.
When you were 4.
When I was 4 years old. But I was just 4 years old. I learned all about scapular stability. But the first person who really taught me about scapular stability was a physical therapist. And his philosophy, I'm not going to say names, his philosophy really was squeeze it back, hold it back as you do your chest press, squeeze it back, hold it back as you do all these presses. And I got to tell you, it actually damaged my shoulders more than it helped.
Yeah.
And it was, again, his philosophy. But when you're young and impressionable and you're listening to anybody who you think is a lot smarter than you, you take in all this information and you're always thinking, oh my gosh, he's obviously smarter than I am, so I should listen. And as I came to realize, hey, you know what? That scapula actually is supposed to move. It's designed that way. 17 muscles are attached to it to let it move in various directions. It's supposed to kind of move around.
Yeah. So I want to go back to that because, again, Brian and I both been in the industry for 30 plus years at this point.
Yeah.
And I think this is my impression, and this is certainly my experience, is that the understanding of the shoulder was very unsophisticated when we started. It just was. It was like, chest press and, pec flies and what I would say about that scapular stability piece, because I remember it being taught this way, was this was specifically related to the push-up or the bench press.
Yeah.
right? Like they were really not thinking of the scapula when you lift your arms over your head, or when you rotate and reach forward, or when you throw something.
Yep.
Like that was actually not in their thought process, because at that point, all of the exercises were designed to understand and train scapular immobility during
Mhm.
something like a chest press or a push up,
Yep.
right?
And
Because
that's
that's what you
something
experience. That's what I experienced too.
exactly. Exactly. And that's the thing that most people forget is that a lot of what we learned about when it came to fitness at the beginning were things that were really designed to be focused on, you know, those I'm going to use the term, meathead muscle bound guys, bodybuilding basically is
Yeah.
where a lot of this came from. And
Yeah.
where the focus was strength building, powerlifting, bodybuilding. It wasn't about performance yet. We didn't really get into performance. And in fact, I was just talking with a couple of my clients. They played football in college and they're a little older than I am. And they said, we weren't allowed to train. We weren't allowed
Yeah.
to lift weights because it made us slower.
Yeah.
So while they wanted us to train a little bit in the off season during this, we never lifted a weight. We couldn't because they didn't want us to be tired. They didn't want us. And that's really, it wasn't meant for performance. And you look at athletes, baseball players and basketball players from the 70s and 80s. I mean, Michael Jordan, you look at him, when he first came out of high school, he was a scrawny string bean
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and he
Yeah.
never looked muscle bound. But later, as he grew into his body and he developed and weight training became more of a thing for performance, it changed everything. And I think that's when we began looking at the body differently for performance and actually beginning to identify, okay, training can be used to enhance performance rather than just build big muscle.
And it's really that change from uh again, a kind of sagittally oriented,
Mm,
bilaterally symmetrical. Again, use the chest press as an example, or a
yep.
pull down or whatever. And even in Pilates, like everything is from traditional Pilates is more bilaterally symmetrical in certain ranges of motion. And really that whole change, that wonderful change really of functional movement, not just performance,
Hmm.
but what if I have to put my suitcase in the overhead bin? What if I have to reach up to
Hmm.
the top shelf? What if I am throwing a baseball? Like all of
Hmm.
those different ways that the shoulder gets used were
Yeah.
just, I think we're a little bit beyond the theoretical framework that had been developed.
Yeah.
And that
No,
has come up
absolutely.
over time. But that's at that point is pretty unsophisticated, really.
And functional training, the word functional
Yeah.
really didn't hit our world until probably the late 90s, 2000s, that it was
Yeah.
really a thing that was taught. When you'd go to a conference or something, people were actually teaching that. And it was a very small select amount of people. And then
Yes. At
functional
the high end.
training, right, at the high end.
And it was
And
this was
then
like the high end sophisticated teachers.
exactly. And they were the only ones doing it. And then it sort of started, forgive me, but it started getting watered down into doing crazy things, standing on a bosu with one leg, juggling a ball, using this and that. You can go to the other extreme as well. But when it comes down to real function, like you said, putting a bag in the overhead bin, every time I travel, I can't tell you how often because I'm a 190-pound guy, 6 foot tall. People ask me, "Could you please help me with my bag?" Sure, and I put it
Yeah.
over my bin. I'm thinking, you don't look feeble. Now, if you're
Right.
4'9", okay, you can't
Right.
reach. I get that.
Right. Right.
But someone who's of average age and average size, I keep thinking, wow, that's a functional activity that you should be able to do and should be able to train for because
Mhm.
it's something that you're going to have to do in your life. You're going to have to reach for a high shelf. You're going to have to, twist, turn, pull on a
Yeah.
heavy door,
Paint your
push
ceiling.
something, paint your ceiling.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, trust me, I was doing a whole lot this weekend that I was moving things and twisting and all these weird configurations, screwing things into walls. And I was thinking, wow, the fact that I'm sore, but I'm not debilitated, I'm like, that's actually pretty good. I'm
That's
pretty
called
functional.
That's functional training, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's those moments when you're doing a move like you were doing and you're lifting and pushing and moving and shoving and up and down. Like that's if you can do that, that's functional training, right? You can do the
Mhm.
things you need to do in a fairly physical way. for your life successfully. That's what we're looking for with scapular stability. So one of the things that I have been pushing for in my own particular world is changing that idea of scapular stability to the concept of dynamic scapular control. So,
I like
and
that
how I
term a
think,
lot better.
yeah, and how I think about that is you don't want to lose control of the scapula, which sounds funny, but you'll see it all the time in training, that people really just let the scapula kind of go farther than it needs to go. And they don't create a solid foundation from their scapula for the glenohumeral joint to move. And that there really does need to be obviously a tight coupling there. Is how much is the scapula moving? How much is the glenohumeral joint moving for whatever activity you want to do? And that's why I say dynamic scapular control. You want the scapula to move as much as it needs to with control for the optimum mechanics of the movement. And that is not a concept. Okay.
Yeah.
That's like, what does that mean exactly? How do I do that?
Yeah. No, I found that, I don't know when it was, but with functional training, we actually went the opposite direction. And I find a lot of fitness is a pendulum.
Yeah.
And when it comes to some, it's going to swing way over to the other side. So again, we went from pinch your shoulder blades back while doing a bench press, or, hold them in place. Don't let that move. To now, I had other people trying to teach me, lead with the scapula as you press, lead with the scapula. And I kept thinking, okay, it actually made my shoulder feel more free because I had been doing it the other way for so many years that I was thinking, oh, I feel like I have greater range of motion. Well, dummy, yes, I do, because my scapula was moving.
Yeah.
But there's got to be a happy balance between the two and a normal range of motion and a normal rhythm that occurs and a timing that occurs between the muscles as they're moving together with the bones, with the ranges of motion. There has to be a natural timing and rhythm.
And that's exactly, and that's one of the things, like I always talk about the scapula, really the scapula specifically, but the shoulder generally, as having a very wide range from too much mobility and instability to too much stiffness. And honestly, for every client, there's several aspects to that coordination and timing piece. So one of them is, what are all the parts that are participating in the movement, and how much are each of those parts participating? So you think about throwing something. All right. So if I'm throwing something, I'm thinking about thoracic mobility, like how much is the rotation of my thoracic spine and maybe cervical spine and maybe lumbar and maybe hips participating. But let's think about the thoracic spine. How much is my scapula participating in terms of, let's say, going into a protraction? How much is my glenohumeral joint participating? Because one of the things that they talk about a lot when they're talking about people like pitchers or tennis players is when you have an imbalance in the different parts that are participating in the movement, that's when you end up with dysfunction.
Yeah.
Right. So in other words, if the thorax isn't moving enough, if you don't have enough spinal mobility, you're going to end up with more mobility in the shoulder and the scapula, the glenohumeral joint, which is going to potentially cause trouble or stress to build up in that area, which is taking more mobility because the other area is taking less mobility.
Yeah. And if you watch a pitcher, a really world-class pitcher or volleyball player, someone like Roger Federer or, Nadal or someone in a tennis player, when they sort of, I'm going to use the term wind up, but they're externally rotating their arm to a degree that it's almost as though their forearm is now parallel with the ground. They can go back so far. I used to work at the University of Hawaii with some of the volleyball players. And when they would go to spike a ball, they could rotate their arm so far back. And I kept thinking, that can't be healthy in the long run, but it really helped them for what they were doing. And at a young age, all the tissues were nice and resilient and pliable, and it worked. But that range of motion could lead to, issues down the road by having too much mobility in that area.
One of the things because I was looking into this originally, I was looking at how ranges of motion get developed. This is a tiny rabbit hole, but we're rabbit holing for the moment. And one of the things with both dancers in terms of their hip extension ability and pitchers / tennis players / volleyball players, even swimmers to some extent, the range of motion in their shoulders. So, for example, a baseball pitcher will have a huge amount of lateral rotation because, to your point, they literally go back, and you'll see this if you do a slow motion or a stop motion, or you just even look at a pitcher in mid pitch, or a tennis player is about to throw a serve. Like, you watch it, and they're literally parallel to the ground. Like, they are so externally rotated, but they don't have as much internal rotation.
Right.
So a lot of times it's just that they've taken that range and just dialed it in a different direction.
Interesting.
At least in pitchers, right? Because there's strength. They just don't have the internal. They just don't have the internal rotation. They got the external. So they're just
They don't
taking
have
that
to.
and
They
just
horizontal a deduction across the body. They don't have to necessarily internally rotate as much as come across the body. So yeah, that makes sense.
exactly. And again, most people that are going to reach high levels train all that stuff very, very early on when their body is managing and making its myofascial suit, if you will.
Sure.
So that changes those ranges of motion during those formative years.
Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense. And to your point, when you are doing it when you're young, anybody who's taken up a sport, and we see it with pickleball now, it's become the rage. When you take up a sport when you're in your 50s, well, your body is not necessarily pliable, and that fascial suit is, let's just say, it's already been tailored one way, and to stretch it in ways that it was not designed before. It takes a while. It takes a while for that suit to move around it.
And you may tear a few seams here and there,
Just a
right? You
few,
may just like,
few. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I like the thought of that. It is your myofascial suit that you've created. And we do create it by what we do. And if all we're doing is sitting and at computers and things all the time, and suddenly you're asking it to do something that it wasn't designed to do or hasn't been doing for a long period of time, and you're asking it to do it on a higher level than maybe you necessarily should, and asking to do it more often than maybe you should, you're going to have that issue. Whereas if you're doing it when you're like my kids' age and they're teens or whatnot, or even before that, you are creating where that myofascial suit is at a young age, that those bones and whatnot do model, and those muscles and fascia do model that. And so they're able to sustain those ranges of motion a little bit, a little longer in life.
Better. It just changes things radically. I've worked with a lot of pitchers and dancers and other people in their 50s and 60s, and those ranges of motion are still with them. That pattern that they created through heavy work. These are all people that are moderate level professionals or high level performers in their fields. Those stick forever. The way that you build things early.
Yeah, it is interesting. It is interesting. And creating that additional stability, though, because when you have so much mobility, we do want to make sure, and I've worked with a number of dancers, you've worked with a lot more in your time, to sort of tame that mobility. Can be very challenging for some.
So one of the things that I like to talk about in terms of this whole topic is the first thing you have to do in any of these circumstances is understand, where is my scapula and where is my shoulder and how is it moving?
Yeah.
Right. And as a client, again, I've been trained a lot of people over the years. People have absolutely, for the most part, no idea what their shoulder is doing. It's very automatic. It just does what it does. They haven't thought about it. They haven't figured out what it means. So one of the things I often say, whether it's lumbopelvic stability or scapular control, the first thing is just helping that client understand, where is my scapula?
Sure.
And what is it doing? Because and that's where I think the idea of scapular stability started, because the first step in that often is, can you feel that it is stable? Can you feel that it is moving? You think about all fours, like a little plank preparation, right? And doing, we call sternum drop, and I'm sure there are other names for it. We basically protract and retract the scapula. Understanding, oh, my scapula move. That's novel for most of my clients. Like, they don't realize that happens. And then, okay, can you find that place where you're holding it steady while you, let's say, lift one arm up or lift a leg up or something else? Like that alone is just that awareness of, oh, my scapula are moving or they're not moving, and what are they doing? And without starting with some of that awareness, you can't train a more nuanced and more subtle, like how much am I moving and how much do I want to control it and how much do I keep it in place, let's say when I'm doing a chest press, as opposed to letting my scapula really protract. Yeah.
I
You can't
love
make
that
choices
term.
without knowing that.
Yeah. That term awareness. I find that especially in the fitness world,
Mhm.
okay, people come to us and they want to work out.
Yes.
They expect on their very first session to be sweaty and to work hard and all of that. And I think a lot of the younger trainers, and probably this goes into Pilates and yoga and other aspects of fitness as well. They want to give a good workout because they want the person to come back workout. Yeah. They
Correct.
want they want them to come back. They want them to feel it.
Yes.
Teaching something like awareness is very subtle. And for a lot of people, it's frustrating
Yep.
because
They can't
you put
feel it.
them, they can't feel it, and you put them in that quadruped position and you say, okay, just hold I want you to feel where your scapula is in place. Now, I want you to lift one arm and they drop. And you say, did you feel that happen? What happened?
No.
Okay. And it frustrates them. And at the end of an
Yeah.
hour, if you haven't done that much, it can
Yeah.
be frustrating. So I totally agree with you that the awareness is something that needs to be worked on. It is so vitally important. And people ask me all the time. I taught a course this weekend where someone basically said, well, what if they need to do this, but they don't want to do it? And I said,
Yeah.
do you want the real answer? And what I tell my clients? And they said, yes. I said, suck it up and do it. Because sometimes you got to eat your vegetables.
Yeah.
And how I put it is it's going to we're creating a foundation that everything else can build upon. If we don't
Yeah.
create a strong foundation, you can't build any strength on top of this. You can do exercise, but you're never going to build really good functional strength. And usually if you explain that, they'll go, oh, I got it. But if you don't explain that, it's hard.
If you don't explain that and you assume that they know why you're doing those little things you're doing, no. So two things about that. One is, yes, absolutely. Like, you have to explain it to them. And that's something where I certainly felt this in experiences. I'm sure you did too. As my confidence grew, my ability to go,
Mm-hmm.
just do what I tell you to do. Like, this
Yep.
is good for you for this reason. And that's what we're going to do. Right.
Yep.
I mean, I don't get a lot of pushback from my
Yep.
clients.
Nope.
Because I come in with the authority that says, I know what I'm doing and we're going to do this. So they do it.
Yep.
And a beginning teacher doesn't have that. They're slightly terrified. They really have no idea what they're doing yet. And their insecurity means that the client will lead things more than they do for you or I. Right. So there's just that. But the other piece of that too is, and I've done this a lot, like I call it training from the inside out and from the outside in.
Mm-hmm.
So for classic for me is if I'm training somebody who needs that workout, who's like, they're like, I want more. I got to feel more. They need more sensation. I do something like on the reformer. I often will start my athletic clients this way with what we call long stretch, which is essentially a moving plank, right? Your hands on the foot bar, your feet are on the shoulder rest. You're in a plank position. You're moving forward and back with your shoulders. I'll start with that because that challenges all kinds of things. They can really feel what their shoulders are doing. And I also can really see it's an assessment for me of how much stability or mobility and what's happening in the whole area. And so I start from the outside, give them like a strong feeling that I know is safe, and then I back it down. Right. And then I may build it back up. So it's always like, sometimes you can go to those subtle places early with a client. Sometimes clients don't want to leave that subtle place. That's another, in Pilates land, that's more common than in fitness land, where it's like they'll show up and they'll say, oh, I'm so happy lying on the mat and breathing for, or whatever, or doing leg slides for 15 minutes or whatever it is. That can happen in Pilates. That's the other side of that. But it's also just finding that balance. Yeah.
Yeah. I could see that. No, I like that you want to start with where is it in space and what it should be doing. Because if they can understand where it is and they can understand how it feels to just hold in place while you're doing a plank, while you're doing something holding, and sometimes they can't even do quadruped. You have to put them against a wall.
Right.
And once they can feel that, you say, can you feel that? Can you feel how you pushed out a little bit? Oh, and they start getting that subtlety. Once you've turned on that proprioception,
Yes.
then you can dial it up. Then it's
Yes.
like an intensity that they can now feel, where you
Yep.
can say, okay, you feel where it is in space. Great. Then you can attach that awareness as they're moving it in space. You could say, oh, yeah, can you feel how it collapses when you're doing this? Yeah. All right. We need to work on that.
Exactly. And I think the key word you said there, which I think you knew was the keyword, was proprioception,
Yeah.
which, for those who don't know, this is basically an understanding of where your body is in space and what it's doing, how fast it's moving, etc. So one of the things I find key in scapular stability is enhancing proprioception. Again, how do you help people to feel what their scapula are doing? And one really simple thing that I do is to have them up against a wall so they can feel their shoulder blades kind of poking into the wall, if you will,
Mm,
or whatever surface is appropriate, but usually a wall is good. And then just do like a simple chest press move,
mhm.
and do their scapula move away from the wall, or do they stay kind of anchored to the wall? So that, again, that gives them the feedback. If their scapula aren't against something, like if somebody's doing a wall push-up or a plank, man, they don't know what their scapula are doing. It's been my
Yeah.
experience. They really don't have much awareness in that position. So I try to give
Mhm.
them at least some of that feeling in a position where they can feel where their scapula are.
Mhm.
And that seems to be at least another, again, a good place to start with just understanding what they're doing.
Well, and it's great to do it against a wall rather than lying on their back,
Yeah.
because the weight of their body pushing back, it's going to restrict their range of motion. Whereas if they just have a little bit touching the wall, they can feel that grazing forward and back as they're moving, or with lateral motion, whatever it is that you're asking the scapula to do, they have a little bit more of that proprioceptive feel,
Yep.
because they've got the skin touching, they've got, that sensory as well as where the scapula is. Uh,
Right.
a lot of times I'm remembering a client that I had who had Parkinson's,
Oh.
and when we were working together, he couldn't move his scapula. No matter what we did,
Mm.
they just would not go together, and he couldn't feel it.
Yeah.
And if you understand Parkinson's, trying to get muscles to fire on command can be a challenge, especially after he had brain surgery. So everything had to be retaught.
Wow.
Uh, So literally, I had to have him go in sort of a corner or a push-up position and let his chest fall to the wall, and me manually pulling the scapula back, holding it there, and say, can you feel that? Now squeeze. So I literally had to put him into retraction, have him hold it, and just get him to feel what retraction felt like, because
Yeah.
he couldn't
Yeah.
proprioceptively,
It wasn't connected.
wasn't connected. And I found this with a number of my male clients who are a little bit older, who really were never into sports, never really understood
Mhm.
their body.
Mhm.
They had this disconnect proprioceptively
Mhm.
with where their scapula was in space. So sometimes I would literally have to squeeze it back for them and say, now hold that. Can you feel that? Can you feel what muscles are holding that there? Now relax. Now, can you repeat that? Sometimes they could, sometimes they couldn't. Sometimes it took 2 or 3 repetitions. But once you got it there, they were like, oh, yeah. And then you're like, great, that's what we're looking for. Now, can you do it with your arms out in front of you? And of
Right.
course, they lift their arms and no, they can't.
Right.
Okay. So, it's a process of
Yeah.
getting them in different positions, maybe against gravity, maybe with the help of gravity,
Yep.
whatever it took. I
Yep.
mean, I would put them on a foam roller with a wooden dowel and stand over them and have them pull. I would pull the wooden dowel away from them, and then they would pull against me back. We did a video of this a while back, and just that squeeze. And it's like, oh, yeah, I can feel that. It's like, all
Creating the
right,
resistance, right?
creating a little bit of
Which
resistance.
increases the sensation. Basically, you're just trying to give
Right.
them that idea of like, I feel it more, because when they're just doing this, sliding their scapula, forward and back, like protraction and retraction, sometimes they really don't even feel that. But you add a little
No.
resistance, like, oh, that's what I'm engaging. Oh, that's what I'm doing to push, and
Yep.
that's where proprioception is building up that sensation,
Yeah.
increasing
And I
that
find sometimes it needs that. Sometimes we really need
a
to
lot of
have that
times.
proprioception
Yeah.
of additional strengthening, additional resistance, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
is you need to be able to feel that, because as soon as you're pulling, you're like, oh yeah, I feel those muscles working. If it's too
Mhm.
light, nothing's working. They're
And that,
working,
yeah.
but they're not working strongly enough to feel.
And that's where I say, like, starting from the outside in, right?
Mhm.
Maximizing sensation, giving them something maybe a little harder than they can do easily, like,
Mhm.
a
I like
push up
that.
or a plank or whatever. And so they feel it like, oh, now I can, or like, that I love that bar one. We did a little video on, I think it's up right now on Instagram or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. That's just like, oh, that's what it feels like. And then you can start to refine that. You got to give them like a
Mhm.
bigger sensation so they can start to feel the more subtle sensations underneath.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, when we're talking about the scapula and talking about where it is in space, obviously there's what we talked about before, scapular humeral rhythm. As our humerus
Mhm.
moves, the scapula is going to follow it, whether the arms move forward, to the side, to the back, overhead. The scapula needs to be moving, but it needs to be moving at the right amount of
Right.
range of
Yeah.
motion, at
The
the
right
right
rhythm.
timing, the right
Yeah.
rhythm. And we should probably discuss, how much should it move? When
Mhm.
should it move? What are we looking for?
So, right. So we kind of going to take this back just one more step. And
Okay.
so one of the things that I often think about with scapular stability is the first thing is, where are my scapula? What are they doing? So that's kind of what we've been
Mhm.
talking about, is different ways to just feel the movement, understand if it's moving or not moving. Step one. Step two is then looking at how much do you want it to move in different exercises?
Mhm.
Right. So that's kind of the next step. And I would take one step in between those, which is, let's say I have someone with a shoulder injury. A lot of times, again, my first step is going to be maybe glenohumeral stuff we talked about last time, then some basic scapular stability, all fours or plank work or that kind of thing, just wear my scapula or wall planks, that kind of thing. Then I start to look at moving the arms, but moving them below 90 degrees.
Mhm.
Right. So, and if you're moving the arms well below 90 degrees, and whether it's an abduction or extension or flexion, you don't have to move the scapula very much. So it's kind of like understanding how much the glenohumeral joint can do without the scapula participating.
Mhm.
Then my next step, and we'll talk about this. I think we're going to do our next one is going to be really talking through with exercise examples all these steps of developing this. Then I start to take the arms and really look at glenohumeral rhythm. Right, what happens when I lift the arms above 90 in abduction or in flexion, and how much should that scapula move? How do I coordinate all those bits? Because that's the hard piece.
And every range of motion, the scapula moves a little bit differently,
Yeah.
because abduction to the side,
Mhm.
you can go about 30 to 40 degrees without the scapula really doing a whole lot.
Yes.
Whereas forward, you can go about 60 degrees, even 70 degrees for some people, without the scapula really doing a whole lot of movement. Going backwards is less because it butts up against the scapula, and of course, with rotation, you really can keep the scapula relatively still. But then
Yeah.
as soon as you add anything overhead, and whether it be at any
In any
angle,
plane, in any plane, basically. Yeah.
right, you're talking about a lot of movement that you're asking of that scapula.
Right. That's necessary.
Yeah.
So thinking about glenohumeral or scapulohumeral rhythm, and I'm always like, I just feel like it's gleno-scapulohumeral, humeral, gleno-scapular, thoracic
They
movement.
all
But
moving.
really,
They all
it's
moving.
all that stuff, really. I mean, they call it scapulohumeral rhythm, but so in theory, and I love these theories because, of course, I have a perfect goniometer in my brain, my scapula is supposed to move half the speed of my humerus, basically. So for every 1 degree or every 2 degrees that my arm moves, the scapula rotates 1 degree. Again, if I'm going up roughly above 80 degrees in abduction or different inflection. So the key thing about that for me, because that's not something that I mean, I can see coordination, and
Mhm.
I can see positive integration of the scapula and the glenohumeral joint, right? I can see when that's working well and when it's not. My brain is not calculating the exact degrees that they're both moving.
No.
So when I'm looking at that, I want to see it from the back. Oftentimes, and I'm thinking of particularly, like I think of your back, Brian, or I think a lot of my more muscular people's backs, where really the scapula are not that visible from the outside. Like I've got this really bony spine in my scapula. Like you can kind of see them move because they're just right under the skin and whatever, poke out. I've got to actually sometimes really tactilely put my hands on those scapula lightly, kind of just on the skin, and feel if they're moving underneath my hands when they take that arm up, and feel if they're moving evenly. One image Eric Franklin uses, which I like, is like, it's like the bells ringing, right? Bells, ding dong, ding dong. And for a lot of people, when they take that arm up, what you want is you want that whole scapula rotating so that that bottom tip goes from, wherever it is, more or less straight down, and kind of swings around almost to the side seam of your shirt. So that's really that upward rotation of that scapula.
Yeah. Yeah. I often will say, sort of, if it's at 6 o'clock and you're moving it to the side, for me, it's always, okay, you're going to take it out. And yes, you're right. It actually does move forward.
Yeah.
And that's the thing most people forget is our ribs are round.
Yes.
But most people think of our scapula as moving only in one degree, one range of motion,
which isn't
in the
true
frontal plane. No,
yeah.
It really wraps around. So, and how many of us actually do in daily functional activity, pure abduction out to the side, have that arm go directly out to the side? Because if it does, really, you're retracting the scapula, because naturally we're in front of the body, in which case that scapula is going to wrap around. And you're right, it's going to end up right around, as my arm is, out here, it's right around that side seam of my shirt.
Yeah. If I'm going up, like I feel it. It's like, oh, what's my tip of my scapula doing all the way over there?
Yeah.
Right. It moves a lot, ideally.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
And it should. And it should.
Yeah.
And that's something that we look at. And something that, when we're looking at glenohumeral rhythm, scapulohumeral rhythm, whatever you want to call it, oftentimes I find that one side is going to move differently than the other. We are not symmetrical beings.
No, and we don't use our upper body symmetrically at all.
No. I played baseball for years. My right arm, I can throw, easily, 75 yards without a problem. My left arm, not even close. Not even close. I can throw, 30 yards, maybe 40. But I've been trained on one side of my body so much that from the ground up, I can generate a lot of power. And that arm has been trained through thousands and thousands and thousands of repetitions to do a specific motion. So my scapula are going to be moving differently.
Yeah.
And you're not talking just from sports. I mean, dancers. I've talked to many, many dancers, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but especially classically trained dancers are much stronger on one leg than the other, because one leg seems to be the one that they're on more often.
There's that, but thinking about, I'm going to take a really simple example. I think about working at a computer, right? And because many of our clients have to work at computers, as I often say, to afford us. So there you go. So you're sitting, but oftentimes like one hand's on the mouse, right? And what you'll find, even in people who are not doing high-level sports or high-level asymmetrical activities, is one shoulder will stabilize and one shoulder will be mobile.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe oftentimes it's the dominant arm that's a little more mobile. The other one is a little more stable. Not always, but that's often how it goes. Because basically you're using the two sides much more, honestly, I'd say much more asymmetrical in the upper body than in the lower body. Just because we're right-handed.
It also depends on your job. Because I tell people all the time, when they say, why does my left arm seem a little bit stronger? I say, well, depending on what you're doing, one side is going to be your fine motor skill. The other is going to be gross motor skill. So if I had to hold a bowling ball to write on, well, obviously my right hand, since I'm right-handed, I'm going to do the fine motor skills, but my left hand is going to have to hold that.
Right.
And I learned this, believe it or not, from a woman named Eileen, who was a veterinarian. She was a tiny little Asian lady. But she would tell me about, having to give shots to Rottweilers and things like that. And I'm thinking, no wonder your left side of your body is so much stronger than your right because she
'Cause
was
she's
very asymmetrical.
stabilizing a giant thing that probably weighed close to what she did or half of her
Oh, at
body
least.
weight. Right,
Absolutely.
and they're, you know, I mean, they're muscular and they're struggling, whatever.
She was barely 100 pounds, but she was very
Uh-huh.
strong in one arm and
Yeah.
one side of her body, so she could stabilize and use one
Yes.
arm to really hold and be able to do whatever she needed to do with the other side.
Right,
And that was
right,
the first
right.
time that I thought, wow, there's asymmetry with work as well as activity and sports and
Yeah.
all of that. So
Yeah.
for her, she trained herself that way. But I see that with a lot of people that their non-dominant side will actually be good for gross motor strength
Yes.
and and possibly that's their stabilizing side, whereas their other side is much more fine motor skill.
Nice. Yep. Absolutely. So we've gone many different rabbit holes here. This
Sorry.
is, you know, we didn't do like, you know, like go to all fours and then try to lift an arm and just keep your scapula stable. But this is kind of where we want you guys to be thinking. At least where I want you to be thinking. I'm going to be blunt on my agenda here. Is really starting to look at the mechanics of the whole area and really seeing how the parts work together.
Mhm.
And again, if I'm watching somebody raise both their arms up over their head in abduction, right? Just like taking their arms up overhead and reaching them up, I'm looking to see how each of those scapula are moving. I'm looking to see whether a shoulder rises on one side, whether the scapula rotates evenly on both sides, whether there's, you know, one elbow's more bent because they can't get it quite as high on that side.
Mhm.
Like I'm really looking for and trying to aim for over time symmetry as much as possible on the two
Right.
sides. You may never get there, but again, we're always trying to look for balance as much as we can, or aiming towards balance. And that's I mean, what I love about what we do, and I'm thinking about you in personal training environment, I mean, the Pilates environment, is then you start to take those ideas and you add resistance to it. I mean,
Mhm.
you add load or you add weights, or in Pilates, we add straps, and you have somebody doing like, classic exercise for me would be serve a tray. Hands are up, you reach the straps forward, you open them out, you come back, you come in. So, reaching forward, opening out into horizontal abduction, coming back, and then bending the elbows in. Or, in your case, it might be like a chest press.
Mhm.
And then starting to feel in a complex motion, how do those scapula move, respond? Do they respond appropriately? Do they over respond? Do they under respond? Like let's take a chest press, for example, or something just where the
Mhm.
arms are going forward. One of the things I see a lot in the Pilates environment that I try to work with a bit is that people bring their arm forward. So let's say they got the elbow bent at their sides, they're reaching that arm forward, and the scapula disconnects completely. So the whole scapula comes kind of forward over the rib cage, protracts and kind of
Mhm.
upwardly tilts and widens away from the spine in the back. Right. And then they come back and that whole scapula is kind of moving a lot. And oftentimes they're in those clients, they have a weakness in the upper body and there's an instability in how that rhythm is working. So with
Mhm.
those clients, these are my more mobile clients, a lot of my female clients, I'll say, okay, so let's see if you can bring that arm forward and not let that whole scapula slide forward around the rib cage. Can you
Yep.
keep and not lock it low? This is like, don't let it lock it, but just how much can you keep that stability and that connection to the scapula into the back of the ribs as that arm's coming forward,
Mhm.
and coming back. And it's like, so like with a chest press or with a plank, when you come down into a full push up, and you try to do that with your scapula stable,
Yeah.
not such
Those
a good
tough.
idea.
Yeah.
It's also going to stress a lot of things. So allowing the
Mhm.
scapula to move slightly into, depending on the person, it varies wildly, into retraction, and
Yep.
then pushing back into that neutral position. So playing with those kind of things where you're really moving the scapula in a smooth, coordinated, controlled fashion as much as it needs to with control in complex movement.
Mhm. Yeah. I think where I was focusing, uh, is there is asymmetry in people
Hmm.
naturally.
Yeah.
And some asymmetry is going to be all right. I'm not
Oh,
trying
yeah.
to overcorrect for
No,
everybody
no.
because not everybody's going to be able to completely erase, years and years of a pattern. But what I like about what you were saying is you want to begin to make them aware of where it is, especially for your more mobile clients or even your more stable clients. And often what I'll do is, as they're doing something in a standing position, especially either with a band, a tube, I've got these fiberglass rods that I use to push against. I can put my hands on their shoulder blades lightly.
Yeah.
I find sometimes we need an additional point of contact, an additional amount of
Yeah.
proprioception,
Yep.
sensory.
Yep.
And by putting my palms right on their scapula, as one's moving too fast or too far, I could say, now pause right there. Can you feel how my hand is a little more to your side? Oh, yeah. Okay. Can you make them a little more even? Ah, got it. Now slowly move forward. Can you keep them even? Giving them that secondary sense. And then I lighten it until they can do it without. And then I'll change their range of motion, have them go out to the side more, have them, by changing. I like the fiberglass resistance rods because they come from the ground up. And you're pushing forward, I can push at different angles.
Yeah.
So I can vary that. Tubing, bands, you can do the same thing. But it's a great way to just add a little bit of that proprioception to make it aware of where it is in space. And just so that they know, okay, we want this one not to move as much. Or can you feel how this one's moving normally and this one is kind of stuck? This one doesn't want to move. Can you move it a little further? Can you think about this side a little bit more motion? So sometimes adding that additional proprioception can be a benefit.
Absolutely. And that gets into, are you comfortable touching your clients? Is it okay to do manual cueing, whatever, all those issues. But that's really, I found that to be the most effective way to help them understand it. And I find two different techniques. One is keeping my hands loosely on top of their skin so they can feel the scapula sliding underneath my hands. Like they can feel that, like that. Sometimes they can feel that. Or as you're doing more, I think, like having your hands mirror the movement of the scapula. So they've got that sensation of the skin. Both of those, I think, are really effective at helping them to feel, how is it moving? What am I doing? And then you can, of course, cue them to change that or to adjust that as appropriate.
Yeah. And we've mainly talked about sort of going forward and back and out to the sides. Let's talk about overhead. Because I find that's where things get tricky.
Always.
Yeah, because I can't tell you how many times I've heard from physical therapists, physicians, chiropractors, or whatnot, when a client comes to me, nothing overhead.
Yeah.
Nothing overhead. And my question to the physician, fortunately, most know me already, is I'll say, do you mean overhead? And for those of you watching on YouTube, I'm going to turn sideways so you can see. Do you mean overhead, directly overhead, so that your biceps are right next to your ears? Or do you mean over your head so that your biceps are still in your line of vision and you're more at an angle forward?
Which gets us a little bit of the idea of scaption.
Right. Well, scaption I find is a little more out to the side. I'm talking about even just slightly in front of the body, because it would be almost like a high incline press.
Yeah.
Because that's still safe and keeps the neck out of it. Whereas when you're directly overhead, that can really begin to get some cervical issues going if that's their issue. But the scapula works differently in both of those, very differently.
Yeah.
And I find that getting the scapula to move properly, especially in any overhead movement, that's really a tricky thing to get them to do.
And that for me is the final step of dynamic scapular control always. Again, working, neutral, working below 90, keeping all those, things happening in that range is step 1 and 2-ish. And then step 3 is always, okay, now let's see if we can, to your point, take that arm up into abduction, or, some of the ways that I work with that with especially clients with neck and shoulder issues is things like angels in the snow or pinwheel, things where they're lying on their back, they're supported by the ground, and they're moving their arm along the ground. So they're not having to use a lot of muscular effort, but they're really just getting the mobility going.
Sure.
So those are like, but again, how do you start them getting above 90 degrees? And a lot of times taking the resistance out of it or taking the weight of the arm out of it can be helpful to start that process.
And that's what I usually try and do, is put them on a foam roller or something. And we can go into that a lot more next week. But yeah, putting them on a foam roller, which allows their scapula to move. So I can still monitor their scapula and still be able to feel where it is in space, and gives them something to feel against as well. The foam roller, they can feel if it's touching it or not on each side. It gives them, again, additional sensation. But as they're going overhead, gravity's assisting. As they're going
Yeah.
out to the side, gravity's assisting. Doing angels
Yeah.
in the snow, gravity's actually helping keep their arms on the ground. So it does
Exactly.
definitely help. Yeah. And sort of takes
Yeah.
the additional resistance of the arms out of it, especially for some clients who, you know, have more weight than muscle.
Yes.
And as
Yep.
we get older, some of our older clients are like that. And I'm not saying they're large people, just their strength doesn't really necessarily allow them to move as comfortably overhead as maybe they should.
This kind of gets to that moment of stability going into mobility and going into
Hmm.
more mobility, right? And having where clients have to find that ideally if you're really training somebody from, let's say post shoulder surgery or rotator cuff repair or something like that, like trying to get back those ranges of motion
Hmm.
is really critical to their functional life, and also something that can really take some time. So we start here, like with Angels in the Snow or Primrose, anything just on the ground there or on the roller, which is fantastic. Just working the mobility first. Like, can you do
Hmm.
the movement pattern with a minimum amount of stress and a minimum amount of flare up, hopefully, if I've got an injured client. And then you slowly start to build that up till, they've got either some assistance with the movement with tubes or pulleys, or sometimes in the performer environment you can do that too, or the trap environment, and then starting to work on actual resistance, right? So
Hmm.
it's like just taking that step by step, letting them go into that thing without resistance, and then maybe being assisted into that movement, and then starting to build up the strength to be able to actually take that movement with appropriate rhythm through all the joints and all the parts participating with load.
Hmm. And as always, light load to start with. And eventually, we can begin to increase that. But I'll often do it, as you said, I'll do it with gravity assisting
Hmm.
so that they have a lot more help.
Yeah.
And even in that position, I can add load. I love to do it on the Cadillac where I can use the bars up above to
Yeah.
put straps, bands, anything that I want. If I want isometric, I can put a strap. If I want resistance, I can use a spring, I can use a band, I can use a tube, I can use whatever I want. And I can have different angles because the
Yeah.
bar can be moved forward and back. So I can have them pull at various angles with
Yep.
light resistance and still have a little bit of assistance from gravity
Mhm.
because they're still pulling toward the ground, but they're pulling against, some sort of resistance as well. So they have assistance and resistance at the same time. It's a nice balance, I find.
Yeah, and I think in both the personal training and the Pilates environment, they're great for working the arms in all ranges with kind of
Yep.
concentric, eccentric happening in any direction,
Yep.
right? So where do I want the assistance? Where do I want the resistance? How do I create the stability and the mobility going in whatever plane I'm doing? And those are really just nice ways to, again, advance people up to full performance or full functional
Mhm.
movement, as they're going through the recovery process. And even for clients who are just trying to strengthen and get better and stronger in their upper body.
Yeah. And I think where we started to where to this session to where we are now is all about creating that awareness. And for
Hmm.
us to seeing, okay, are they too mobile? Are they too stable? Is one
Right.
moving too much? Is one moving too little? Make them aware of what's happening in their own body.
Yep.
Get them to understand how their body feels, how it feels when it's working more, forgive the term, but normally more at a appropriate rhythm, an appropriate range of motion,
Mhm.
and then adding the load to that and trying to create that to be more natural so that they can move unconsciously. I had a client just yesterday asking me about, oh, should I do this all the time? Should I be thinking about squeezing this all the time? I'm like, heck no.
No.
I said, you're going to cause a lot more dysfunction. We want it to become natural and unconscious movement. At the beginning, I'll make them aware, but then begin to pull away some of that hyper awareness so that they're just
Mhm.
aware of where it is in space. And then it becomes more of a natural movement pattern. And then they don't have to think about it.
So yes, exactly. And this is easier said than done for
Oh yeah.
sure. Every
I
client.
made it sound like, oh, just do that. It's finished.
No, which is, I mean, for me, I know when I first started teaching, the shoulder was always the thing I was like, oh man, what am I gonna how, what? Give me a framework. Like the framework was
Yeah,
really critical to be able to at least start with something, take another step, figure out how to develop the appropriate skills for the
yeah,
whole shoulder girdle. And that took a while for
absolutely.
me to really get. And again, these frameworks really help because like, okay, they've got good scapular stability. They can be in a plank position and lift an arm, no problem. Everything stays really stable. Great. Now let's play with how their mobility is and below 90
Mhm.
degrees and what happens when they reach the arm forward, do they reach it out to the side, or they reach it back? Are they even on both sides, looking at symmetry? And all those steps really help me to train my eye,
Mhm.
and just help me to see and understand the complexities of the system. So I
Yeah,
wasn't just focused on the scapula, I wasn't just focused on the glenohumeral joint, but I could start to see the harmony between all the bits. And that took a while. So
mhm.
especially for any of you who are new trainers out there, this is not, I don't think it's easy. I
No.
think this takes time. And this is also where I would really encourage you to work with a skilled teacher who can start to
Mhm.
show you, tell you what they're seeing so you can
Yes.
start to see it yourself. Because, that's the other thing is training your eye to recognize a more beneficial versus less beneficial movement pattern. I mean, that took me a while too.
Oh, there's no
That,
question. No
yeah, that was
question.
a thing.
There's so many times I'll have interns and people learning, and
Yeah.
they come in and I say, "Just watch what I'm doing." And I'll say, Can you see this?" And I'll show them, and they'll
Right.
say,
Right.
"No."
Right.
"What do you mean?" And I'll say, "Well, watch this. Can you see the difference between sides?" "No." And it takes a little while. And sometimes I draw on people a little bit or,
Yeah.
move with them, and they'll be like, "Oh." And they say,
Yeah.
"But that's so little." And I say, "Yes, but a little bit can mean a lot." So it
Right.
takes time to develop your eye.
Yes.
And I agree completely. Working with someone who can teach you what good movement looks like, especially in the shoulder,
Yeah.
can be incredibly important and
Yep.
very beneficial because once you develop that eye, then you own it. You're never going to lose that.
No.
It's just something that you're going to keep refining and refining and refining over time. But it takes a while for you to be able to get that first step. But once you've got that, then it's okay. Now I see what I'm looking for.
Yep. Yep. This is one of those things that I find needs, more than many things, honestly, because like
Mhm.
pelvic stability, honestly, it's more straightforward. Dynamic
Yeah.
pelvic control is much more straightforward than the shoulder. And once somebody can really see it and have somebody show you what you're looking for, how you're judging things, how you feel it or see it, that helps you to again refine your eye so you can then move forward and really develop.
Yeah.
So
No,
yeah.
I agree completely. And now next week, we're going to take all of what we've talked about over the last 3 weeks. Okay. We talked about the anatomy of the shoulder structure, we did the pathologies, and today we did scapular stability, mobility, dynamic scapular movement and control. And we're going to put all those together and put those into practice and talk a lot more about the actual exercises and how do we enhance what we want, limit
Mhm,
what we don't want, how do we
mhm.
make the most of the situation.
And
So,
and how do we progress? So kind of I
oh,
think I also really want
absolutely.
to practically kind of give you start here.
Yes.
Here's the next step. Here's the next step. Because I mean, for me, that was the most useful thing was just to have at least a
Yes.
checklist in my head. Step one, step two, step three. If they're already at step three, then I'm working for step four. If they can't do step one, I've got to back that down, right?
Yep.
Where are they on that progression? And then being able to just grade that appropriately.
I
Really
agree.
helpful.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, very good. Well, we have something to look forward to for next week.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for joining us. As always, please do us a favor, give us a good review if you like what you heard today. 5-star reviews are always good on Apple or whatever platform you're utilizing. Hit the like and subscribe button. If you want to ask us a question or give us a comment, please hit us up at movingcombos@gmail.com. Check out our Instagram. Like I said, that one exercise that we did talk about, I believe that is on for
Yeah. The bar
our
one's on.
Instagram, the bar one, I think last week. So take a look at Instagram, Moving Convos. is the best place to do it. You can also DM us on that, and we'll, get back to you as quickly as we can. And for Nora St. John, I'm Brian Ritchie. We will see y'all next week.
Thanks, guys.